Good afternoon, Alex. We are nearing the end of an unfinished journey, and I hope it's always unfinished. And I think uh, the emphasis on intuition is quite strong in these chapters. And I had a wonderful example of that. I met up with someone whom I met first on a scientific and medical network webinar, and we had a lot in common. So we agreed to have lunch. And he told me that he knows of a martial arts teacher who has been engaged by the Paris Orchestra to help violinists with their head and neck, shoulder problems, as you can well imagine playing a violin. And through his experience and his intuition, he can tell whether a violinist was forced to study music or whether he voluntarily wanted to, because his parents were musicians or one of his parents was playing an orchestra, he was pushed into it. And he could tell from their body language whether they were made to study music or really wanted to. And that's incredible. I just thought that's an example of intuition.
What to do about it then?
Um, when you say what to do about it, how would you help the individual? I wouldn't know, of course, but
Hmm.
that I wouldn't um, want to comment on. Whether you're doing it as a profession or you're doing it out of love and vocation, that's the question to ask yourself always. That
Yes,
I believe, yes.
yes. Perhaps with what we're going to discuss today, which is chapter 9 and 10, and chapter 9 is entitled Divine Forces,
Yes, that's right.
the
Yes.
awakening of latent faculties and powers of consciousness.
Hmm.
So perhaps with divine forces, or
Yes.
divine forces could contribute to
Mm.
to that problem and part of
Yes.
that answer.
Hmm.
Well, every word in this title begs commentary and unfolding. I was lingering on the title itself because
Mm.
how often do we get to talk about divine forces and about awakening latent faculties and powers of consciousness?
Hmm.
Seldom we do so.
Yes. Divine in the sense that we can take any force um, to its highest rung of the ladder, its highest status, and recognize that it is a divine force. It is an emanation from divine consciousness. And the three forces, if you like, however you express them, are to do with the fact that if anything is manifested from the unmanifest to the manifest expressed, you need to do three things. You first need to create the raw materials, but that's not enough. Then you just got a pile of bricks, to use a house analogy. You've got to fashion the raw materials, the pile of bricks, into a form, a structure, but that's just a form and structure. No one's living in it. But then you got to indwell, that's the word we used before, we got to live in it. So there you have the three logoi, as they say in the Greek, as the Greeks would say. The third logos comes first, funnily enough, who creates, so to speak, the raw material. The second logos pervades it. That's the Vishnu, a divine force. The first one is the Brahma, a divine force, and the third one is Mahesha, the first logos, who then inhabits the form that's been so created. Now, obviously, there are different words in different languages connected with these forces, but they're all to do with this question of raw material, form, and inhabiting. So the first one, the Brahma, is really to do with electricity in the widest sense. The second one is to do with vitalism, and the third one to do with regeneration. Um, First one is the form side, the life side, and the consciousness side. So we see this triplicity always in action.
Mhm.
Oh, Chit, Ananda, and Sat, or Sat, Chit, Ananda.
Yes, and these three aspects already are shocking to me because as a scientist, I've been trained from day one that they are anathema, that they are totally taboo, right? The idea of a nervous ether, as you write, and
Yeah.
also calling
Right.
for vitalism,
Mm.
which has been demoted over
Oh,
and
yeah,
over.
absolutely. Vitalism has been sneered at almost. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Mm.
And yet they belong to these perennial teachings, if
Yes.
understood, I suppose, as we've been trying to unpack during
Mm.
all these
Mm.
conversations.
Mm. Definitely. Vitalism was very much part of the scientific thinking before Francis Crick and Watson and Wilkes, and let's not forget the third person, uh, made huge strides in molecular biology.
Do you see some kind of winding path? And in the following chapter, in a few minutes, we'll be talking about this limitless evolution.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, I don't want to overinterpret history, but what's the understanding of this very force of vitalism being out there and then having to retreat and be shy, totally shy, because in this case, the history of biology was
Mhm.
dominated for decades by
Right.
the molecular biologist approach.
Yeah.
But now it's coming back because biologists now are
Yes.
addressing agency and free will and purpose and so on.
Exactly so. And it's also coming back via morphogenesis. I'm not saying
Mhm.
it's the same thing, but these things are alluding to the point that there is something more than just molecular biology. And no one is knocking molecular biology, but we are saying that there is more to biology than just molecular biology. There's more to life than just physical biology.
Yes. I must admit, I'm a half-closet vitalist. I've studied vitalist for a long time. I feel a lot of resonance with it. I think the
Mm.
challenge with it is that vitalist is really good at saying that something is missing. But
Yes.
so also at saying what something is not, like,
Mm.
life is not just this or mind is not just that. But then when it comes to saying it positively, what is
Mm.
it then?
What is it?
Well, it's
Yes.
hard, but
Mm.
back to perennial philosophy.
Mhm.
Well, it's there's plenty of explanation as to
Yeah.
what that is.
Yes. When vitalism is very strongly coupled with prana, and prana has its source, its fountainhead in the sun force, as beautifully put by Benjamin Ward Richardson, Fellow of the Royal Society, and Samuel Metcalfe as well, of course.
Mm.
And without vitalism, you just have inanimate matter, but it wouldn't present that quality of life and activity.
You also write about at the beginning of this chapter 9 about the pituitary and pineal gland, which is will be
Oh yeah,
another
yeah. Oh yeah, that's
another oh no.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
please tell us about it.
Oh well, when it's oh no, it means don't tell me about it because I'm embarrassed to hear any more about it. But oh my gosh, how far back can we go? Um, the pineal gland is a witness to the third eye. So if you go back in all the great literature, the ancient occult sciences and the mythology especially, you always find references, whether in the Norse mythology, the Egyptian, the Indian, whatever, to the early races of man, the early races that had one eye. the Cyclopean eye, the eye of the Cyclops the giant, and others, which was really an eye of spiritual vision, so to speak. But when man evolved, or rather devolved, into greater physicality, then the spiritual eye atrophied, and then man acquired the two eyes that we now possess. And the pineal gland is now the witness, so to speak, of that third eye.
Mm.
But the pineal gland can be awakened by certain practices, most certainly, to regain its former status of spiritual vision. And it's been called in all the world literature the Deva eye, the third eye, the eye of Dangma. And that is very significant because Dangma in the Tibetan Trans-Himalayan doctrine, Dangma means the purified soul. And it is saying that when the individual is so purified, then there is this spiritual vision. And do we not find a reference in the Bible that if thine eye be made single, if thy eye be single, thy body will be full of spiritual light? Now, what's that saying? If the eye is single, it's what it's saying is it's a conjunction of the faculty of buddhi, the intuition, but also the higher mind. And when that conjunction occurs, then thy body is full of light. And indeed, the bodies of saints and sages have that aura about them, which is not a hallucination. Far from it, it's a real thing. So even with a slight degree of sensitivity, one can see that glow of light. So the pineal gland, of course, is a taboo. The pineal gland and the pituitary are the two, I mean, the many masters, so to speak. The pineal gland, the pituitary are the torches that light the way for the princess on her way, the pineal gland. So the pituitary confers psychic vision, and that has a lot to do with hallucinations and the great dangers of psychedelics. The pineal gland confers spiritual vision. But medical science will admit the role of the pineal gland physiologically in regulating hormones, in melatonin. But sorry, I'm not trying to turn this into a lecture because you asked me a huge question. The most important point to take away is the polarity between spirituality and sexuality. So the pineal gland, and pineal gland meaning the head chakra, it's in the region of the head, the head chakra. The head chakra and the sacral chakra represent the polarity of sexuality and spirituality. So I have a wonderful quotation from Paul Brunton that at the opposite ends of the human spine, the animal and the man oppose one another. So when one pole is active, the other pole is inactive. When the lower pole is active, the upper pole is inactive. Now, with the lower pole, the sacral, the sexual, we procreate children of flesh. Well, we have to, that's the way it is. With the upper pole, we don't procreate, but procreate means the same type. You know, men produce men, tigers produce tigers. You know, it's not, tigers don't produce elephants. But at the upper pole, we don't procreate, we create. So we create children of the mind. Downstairs, we create children of the flesh.
Mm-hmm.
And we notice, do we not, in the very highly powerful men, billionaires and people who think they can stamp all over others, that very active lower center, it's obvious, isn't it? And we also recognize a very highly active higher center in creative artists, in musicians. So that's the real significance of the pineal gland. But both are needed, of course.
No, this is to me really well explained, and thanks from weaving together the more anatomical and physiological aspects with the Bible and the teachings. And yet, let me ask you one more thing, and we can move on. Are we to expect some keys, some physiological keys at the actual pineal gland when it comes to all these faculties? For instance, should we go and look specifically at what's going on there, or that would be kind of misunderstanding the symbolic way in which we talk about these teachings?
If I understand you, Àlex, I don't see much mileage in looking at the pineal gland physiologically. There is a wonderful book by Mandy Hall, Esoteric Healing, where he talks about the magnetic field and not just the various grades of magnet fields, so the gradations of the magnetic field in the pineal gland. And he suggests research based on that.
Yeah.
But the greater significance of this, though, is the effect of hallucinogenic drugs on the entire centers. Sorry, go on.
No. I guess I'm always, as a real beginner in all of these, kind of struggling
we're all beginners.
Yes, but I'm a beginner within the beginners. Yeah. Struggling to see how to navigate, because I sincerely get or applaud when you talk from the more esoteric point of view. And yet I also spend a lot of time in the exoteric.
You have to.
Yes. And so it's like, well, how much can one import and export explicitly, right? So I'm wondering, as you're saying this about the pineal gland, then should neuroscientists point their scanners there when we're trying to study psychic abilities, or that's simply a waste of time and a misunderstanding of everything we're saying?
I would say it's a waste of time.
I see. And
if
yet,
you're trying to look at it using MRI and PET scans and all of that.
And yet, all of that is beyond the brain, but it all goes also back to the brain, because we're physical beings too.
Yes,
so this is the mystery. This is the
the
conundrum. It goes beyond, and yet it must come back at some point.
Yes, it does. Because if we just bear in mind that we human beings are devolved or demoted, if you like, from divine consciousness, because the universal self has taken on bodies upon bodies to contact the lower planes. And therefore, as we said a couple of times in the past, because we've been demoted down the classroom, we always want to reascend to where we came from. And so, in a sense, we are that very origin in our essence, and we want to rediscover it. So it is very important to engage science as well as the esoteric science. Yeah, I'm sure I shouldn't be so black and white about it. I'm sure with real interest on the part of physiology, they would discover deeper aspects physiologically of the pineal gland, especially with meditators. Have a look at the pineal gland of meditators, of people who don't meditate, and different kinds of people, and then you might see differences.
Now, this descent or this demoting is obviously related to the fact that these powers that you describe here are latent, right?
Yes.
That's where they're latent.
Yes.
And that's where the job is to awaken them.
It certainly is. To awaken them very sensibly, very carefully, and very cautiously, but never force it.
Tell us about intuitive knowledge and the chakras, which you discuss here. And then at the end of this chapter, you also write about psychedelics and the third eye, which you just mentioned.
Yeah. Well, I've mentioned three ways, or well, essentially three, obviously more, of activating the latent powers. One is the Samyana technique. The second one is activating the chakras, and the third one is psychedelics. Samyana, very in outline, is really concentrating so intensely on an object or a subject such that it fills the whole field of your consciousness and you become it, so to speak. And I can think of no finer example, I really mean that, than Sir Isaac Newton, where Lord Keynes, Lord Keynes is an economist, and economists deal with facts, they don't deal with fantasy. In his speech to the Royal Society, given by his son Geoffrey Keynes, because Lord Keynes died, Lord Keynes said Newton could concentrate on a single idea for hours and weeks at a time, till he received his great insight and intuition. And Newton's own words, his own words were, I keep the subject in front of me, in my mind's eye, and slowly, little by little, until I receive the full and final light, words to that effect, until the dawnings of the full and final light. So you're keeping the subject in front of you and you're seeing it light up and light up, brighter and brighter. Samyana. Activating the chakras is to do with the four centers, the main four centers in the human being, activating them by yoga and breathing techniques. And the chakras are like gateways. Carl Jung, I think, referred to them as gateways to higher states. And being gateways, you can immediately see the danger of opening a gate too widely and letting a flood of the wrong sort of creatures coming in. Psychedelics, it's something I have very strong feelings about. It's very much the way nowadays to experiment with ayahuasca and psychedelics in the guise of scientific experimentation. I'm very disheartened when Imperial College and major universities are openly talking of psychedelic research. Literally only today, I got a email from Imperial College as a alumni that they're using or researching psychedelics for gambling addiction. Now, what do psychedelics do? In essence, they disorganize the field, they disorganize the aura around the pineal gland. In a landmark book by Ron Dalzelman, who is a major figure in the anthroposophical movement, he wrote a book, In Place of the Self, in place of the self. So what psychedelics do is they create a sort of virtual copy of your true self. And in Steiner's teaching, which is the same as all the others, different words, you have the physical body, the etheric, the astral, and the spirit body. He calls it the spirit body. He prefers not to use Sanskrit, fine. But the spirit body organizes all the other bodies. And what psychedelics do is scatter and fragment that organizing principle. Goethe wrote a poem or an article, let's call it. He called it The Green Snake and the Beautiful Lily. And this was a warning about trying to force yourself into the unseen worlds until the lower self has been completely subjugated. So in this allegory, the snake willingly, with his body, bridges a river. And the river, we always find, is a river that divides the physical world from the next world. But until the snake willingly puts his body down as a bridge, meaning you sacrifice your lower self, any attempt to force yourself without that sacrifice of the lower self is simply asking for trouble. My other point about psychedelics is to say you're achieving a spiritual level using psychedelics is nonsense, because you're using a material principle to attain something spiritual. You know, you're using materialism to get to spirituality. Nonsense. And finally, about psychedelics, it really is trying a shortcut, and you don't deserve it. But I'm not knocking it for medical research, but it is wrong to confuse a higher state of consciousness with enlightenment. Because with psychedelics, you will have gain glimpses of higher worlds. But if you keep using them, the inner deterioration will be absolutely inevitable. But once you are enlightened, then you deserve to gain access to higher states of consciousness.
What do you mean by inner deterioration?
Right, by inner deterioration, I mean the erosion of your character, in terms of your willpower, in terms of your dependency on drugs, in terms of your conscience, your understanding of right and wrong, in terms of your ability to discriminate, in terms of your mental health.
Let me ask you three things here. This is fascinating. And I'd like to, so I'm asking you something I should perhaps ask to those shamans. And I mean the real ones, not the ones that just wear a hat and
no, fair enough. Yes.
The shamans who today indulge in weekly ceremonies for X amount of money to N number of people, often Westerners who spend their weekend into these trips, right? Perhaps the shaman, no, perhaps not, most likely it's a person who can navigate those waters without drowning, if I can use the analogy.
Rightly said.
Some of them seem to be fine with opening those doors to Western civilization and give them as often as they want those trips.
Right. I mentioned Ron Dunselman from the Steiner School. He said that the Greeks and the Incas and the Mayans, shamans, were entirely different from the standpoint they had the support structure, the emotional structure, and the safeguards to ensure that your trip, if it was going to be an unpleasant one, could be handled. But to take a drug and just to go out into the wide city with all the elementals flying around, and is a quite different matter. The shamans also have a different psychospiritual nature from us Westerners.
Yes.
So there's no black and white. Okay, you have your door opened, and that's fine as long as you then use the benefit of that. But if you keep going back to have the door open, then you're asking for trouble. And there's a very easy way of distinguishing a spiritual experience from a drug-induced experience. With a drug-induced experience, you want it again, repeat it again and again and again. With a spiritual experience, it provides you with an anchor and a support in your life when things are difficult in your life. Are you a better person as a result?
Let me ask you about reversibility of this, both regarding the chakras I wanted to ask you, but also regarding psychedelics, because
Mm,
these interventions or activations, awakenings, seem reversible. You go through it, at least in psychedelics, you go through the trip and then you're back. Of course,
mm,
the way you come back
mm,
it entails some profound changes, and it has been even scientifically demonstrated, quote unquote,
mm.
that psychedelic trips are really effective in precisely getting rid of materialism in a lot of people. So they are able to destroy certain ideological walls.
Yeah, prejudices. Yes, fair enough.
Yes.
I'd accept that, Alex. Certainly, maybe I was being a bit too emphatic. I'm just emphasizing that it's not the answer to a maiden's prayer. That if you use your psychedelic for a certain reason, for a certain purpose, and are able to take advantage of that benefit, then you're
Mm,
using it wisely.
mm,
But then when that turns into an amusement and a
yeah.
diversion
Yeah.
and an escape, that's
Mm.
when you're inviting trouble.
What about the chakras? I think I've mentioned to you that I know somebody
Mm,
whose Kundalini was activated
mm,
wildly,
mm.
and she's
Yes.
been in trouble for months or
Mm,
years.
mm, mm,
How does one, because here we're talking about awakening those powers,
mm.
how does one turns
Calm
them
them.
off? Yeah, come,
Yeah.
how,
Yeah. It's the old story of the sorcerer's apprentice, isn't it? Where the apprentice who has half knowledge
yeah,
knows how to get the broomstick to fetch
yeah,
water, but the
yes,
broomstick keeps fetching water and floods the floor, and
yes,
so he breaks the broomstick in half, and then each one fetches water double the rate
yes.
until the real sorcerer comes and breaks the spell. So how you stop it is just about the most difficult thing. Starting it is much easier. Right. Physically, I would say to make sure that you are grounded. Grounding is the most important thing. Nature, good food, all the rest of it. Do
Mm,
not expose yourself to anything that would activate you or stimulate you. And also, if at all possible, seek the counsel and presence of a wise person, which is easy to say, of course. Prayer is another tremendous benefit. I
mm,
wouldn't say meditation in this
mm.
situation. I wouldn't say that. I'd say prayer.
Yeah, how fascinating all these differences you're
Mm.
making, right? Between enlightenment and just having a higher state
Yeah.
or prayer
Mm.
or meditation.
Mm.
Yeah. Thank you. The third one, and I know we need to move probably to chapter 10 because there's a lot in it too, but the third big question that spurred here is not about reversibility, it's about urgency.
Mm.
Some people claim, and of course, that can be just an intellectual, rational argument that
Mm.
misses many points, but
Mm.
like, given the state of humanity, why not have accelerators, like, buttons you press and they launch you into hyperspace? Like, there's no time to lose in hours, days, months, years of being in a cave trying to awaken those faculties if we have other means that just make
Yes,
it fast.
if we have other means, and I give the example of one member of the Californian family dog commune of the hippie era, very proudly saying it took Tibetan monks 20 years to get there. We did it in 20 minutes. But look what happened: rocketing crime, venereal disease, and mental breakdown. When you say accelerate, I'm not saying, well, one says accelerate. You wouldn't put a Ferrari engine into a little mini car. Um, the work has not so much to do with the Ferrari engine. The work has got to be done on the chassis on the car.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
this is why Yogananda, in his autobiography of a yogi, he mentions Kriya Yoga, where which is before Kundalini yoga, which is more powerful. But even with Kriya yoga, he says you're putting a 60 billion watt light bulb into yourself, whereas previously when you had a 50 billion light bulb.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
what's this doing to you?
Yes. Yes. Wise man you are, Eddie. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Well, now in linking it to chapter 10 and having got your points, your valid points, despite that this may not be the right way of accelerating the process, since in chapter 10 you write about man limitless evolution.
Yes.
Is there a sense of urgency in this evolution, or we can just take it easy and easy evolution, easy spiritual evolution versus come on.
Well, it's both. In the course of time, we will evolve because I've quoted this beautiful saying from Blavatsky, and I'm not just quoting her, you can see it, that nature evinces a march towards a higher order of being, all of nature. It's only a question of how fast you want to march.
How fast do we want it? How fast do we want it?
Exactly. So I think as far as you and I are concerned, it is urgent. Very urgent. But where's the urgency coming from? Is it I want to evolve so that I can do this and I can do that? No good. When that urgency is an inner pressure, it's like an artist who says, I want to play beautifully, whatever instrument, not because I want to gain applause. You'll get it, but that's not why. Just because you love the music. So there is tremendous urgency as far as I'm concerned. And I quote the wonderful example of Franz Liszt, of course, well known as a virtuoso pianist and composer, of course, but a great philosopher who said the task of man is really to strive to approach the limitless with no regard to the blocks that your weaknesses will put on you. So yes, you got weaknesses, but don't let that stand in your way.
All right. Now, evolution. First thing you do, of course, and it must be done because evolution today is so linked with a very particular doctrine of biological evolution, understood as Darwinian evolution.
Yes.
We need to start from it and say, well, that's much more than that.
Yeah, that's absolutely so, yes.
So can you contrast Darwinian evolution with perennial evolution? Yeah.
Yes, without trying to turn it into a lecture, I think, well, let's just firstly, always we understand what we mean by evolution, which is the rolling out of innate potential. It's not piling one thing on top of another or one experience on top of another. It is unfolding. It is rolling out one's innate potentialities. But with evolution, we always have to consider involution, the rolling in as well. You can't just roll out infinitely, you got to roll in as well. But then there's devolution, going from one level to a lower level. So with evolution, there is always involution going on at the same time. So the evolution of spirit is the release of spirit from its imprisonment in matter. Now, if I say the evolution of matter, that sounds a bit odd, but the evolution of matter is the unfolding of the potentiality of matter. The potentiality of matter is towards concretion. So the more matter realizes its innate potentiality, the more it concretizes. So the evolution of matter is at the same time, the privation and imprisonment of spirit.
Interesting, because I thought the evolution of matter is something more spiritual, but it seems you're saying the opposite. It's actually matter becoming more matter-like.
Matter is becoming more matter-like. It's doing its own job as matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But then there is the involution, and so it's the rolling in and rolling out. So right. So science only considers one quarter of the whole scenario. It doesn't consider involution. It doesn't consider devolution. But from the occult point of view, all kingdoms of nature, including humanity, of course, are in different stages of being and becoming, the noun and the verb, always being and becoming. So these beautiful sayings, a stone becomes a plant an animal a human, and a human a spirit, and so on. Rumi's beautiful saying that the whole course of evolution bears witness to dying for the sake of life. Dying for the sake of life. What's dying? The form, the outer form is dying so that the indwelling life can seek newer forms. And so Rumi says, I died as a mineral, I became a plant. I died as a plant, I became an animal. I died as an animal, I became a man. Why should I fear dying? Why was I any less by dying? To him we shall return. So the I that Rumi is talking about, that I died as a plant, refers to consciousness, to the evolution of consciousness that seeks ever newer and more complex vehicles for its expression and kingdoms of nature. So from the occult standpoint, all nature is evolving and involving us, and humanity is a phase state in all of those kingdoms of nature.
Another misunderstanding I had then about involution, which is a word we never hear in the
Yeah,
sciences,
yes.
and I had read about it from Sri Aurobindo, so I'm really sorry if I got that wrong, was something like cosmic involution, meaning that before evolution, right,
Mm-hmm.
this rolling out can happen before, and here the temporal aspects can be misleading because
Yes, of course.
it's not chronological,
It's not, yeah.
but it's like before I roll out the carpet,
Mhm.
somebody
You're
has
right.
had to roll it in.
Yes.
But
The
what you're saying seems to be happening at the same time.
Well, cyclically, let's say it's cyclical. So
Mm.
time, from the esoteric point of view, is cyclical, not just linear. But it's happening at the same time on different levels and different kingdoms of nature. But the rolling out, the other word is manvantara, the dawning of the universe, which is equivalent to wakening up, and it's symbolized by Brahma opening his eye. When Brahma closes his eye, it's known as pralaya, slumber, like
Hmm.
we close our eyes to go to sleep. So that's, if you like, the rolling in. It's not quite the same thing. But Manvantara and pralaya are periodicity that we recognize in the physical world as day and night, the ebb and flow of the tides, the sleeping and waking cycles in nature.
All right. Now, can you repeat then? Sorry, I'm behaving maybe too much as a student, which I am, by the way.
Yeah.
But like Professor, can you repeat again then devolution, the third one?
Yeah, devolution essentially is applies to humanity. If we take the example of water flowing down a hill, water doesn't unfold its potentiality, it just goes from one level to a lower level.
Hmm.
So, in this sense, man has devolved from his spiritual status to his present status, where he inhabits his coat of sin, his coat of skin, I should say. But because, and you call it sin as well, for some people, an interesting
Yes.
way to flip that. Yes, without the coat of skin, there wouldn't be any sin. Yes, so in that sense, because we recognize where we come from, there is always this urge to get back. But Michael Cremo, that a wonderful paleontologist, he gives the example, just the example of auto manufacturers, car manufacturers, who make different models to suit different tastes, different purchasing power, different road conditions, all of that. In the same way, is nature creates different forms and different vehicles to suit her different purposes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, when you were saying about matter, the evolution of matter is becoming more matter-like, maybe it fits with another subsection in chapter 10 when you speak about the relationship between evolution when it comes to our body and when it comes to the earth. So I'm wondering, before we jump into this, does it mean that if we only think about the evolution of matter, and this is a question as a physicist, I also never thought of. I just thought about it now. Because we may think about evolution in the terms of spiritual powers, psychic powers, whatever, but just about the evolution of matter. Does it mean that as time goes on, matter has more latent powers awakened as well?
Oh, gosh, I never thought of that, Àlex.
Yeah, neither have I before.
That's a
No.
very, very good.
I mean, like a new physics, literally a new physics. Like, well, all right, now electromagnetism has awakened that power that it couldn't some thousands or billions of years ago, and now there's this other thing going on in the physical world. Yeah.
Could dark matter provide a clue? Well, in principle, I suppose yes. If the innate spirit allows it to be suffocated so much by matter, then matter is realizing its matter properties. But let's also bear in mind that matter, from the matrix mater in Latin, is the mother principle, the soil that also nurtures and feeds. So I would also like to think that the increasing latent powers of matter are the nurturing properties of matter and not just the constraining. Well, even the seed, the soil in your garden, it's in a sense constraining the seed, isn't it? The seed's got to be in the soil.
Yeah, totally. All right. So then the body and the earth.
The body
and the earth. Yeah.
Yes.
You make a relationship also in a subchapter about, because so far we may think about our own bodies and so on, but in an ecological way of thinking, we also link to the earth.
We certainly are.
Yeah.
And well, yes, well, here one thinks of Vandana Shiva and Satish Kumar, who always emphasize the importance of soil, the earth quality, and the word human, like humus,
yes,
human, is very much to do with the earth. And we are terrestrially creatures of the earth, but we are not just that, of course. We are the divine spark, the seed, the divine seed planted in the earth. But the importance of the earth cannot be underestimated, of course. And last time we said 1 teaspoonful of soil has 10 billion microorganisms.
Okay, let's switch one more gear. You also write about supernal heights.
Yes.
I don't hear that word often either, supernal. So this is when you raise quite up, I suppose.
Indeed.
How close to the end of the journey is that? If there's an end?
It's not an end. We spoke about an asymptote.
Yes.
Which is a very useful mathematical analogy. I think the curve always comes closer and closer to the axis.
Not to be
the other section in there was the antiquity of human beings, and
Hmm.
the substantial, robust paleontology and archaeological evidence for the antiquity of humanity.
Which has appeared in some of our conversations before. I'm always quite
Yeah,
puzzled about it.
yeah.
Yes. Please go ahead if you want.
Well, I think the Vedic concept of time is very useful here. So we talked about Manvantara and Pralaya, Brahma opening his eye and shutting his eye. So the Vedic concept is 4.3 billion years for opening the eye and then 4.3 when you slumber. But the Vedas tell us that the current day of Brahma, the current day, is about 2 billion years. And it's also around 2 billion years that humanity first appeared on Earth as well. So that seems to square up. But when I say 2 billion years, the Vedas say that, but also the archaeological findings from Kramer and Warner point to that 2 billion year dating of man-made objects. And you find uh, certainly in the great epics of the Scandinavians, the American Indians, but certainly the Ramayana and the Mahabharata references to the time when the gods, supernal higher men, so to speak, and the lower creatures were in coexistence, that one didn't come after the other. And I distinguish very carefully, I hope, in this use of the word ape and monkey, that the ape, the monkey in Darwinian understanding is not at all the same as the monkey in the Vedic understanding, because unfortunately, the Vedas, not fortunately, talk in Sanskrit, and the word is Vanara. Now, Vanara doesn't mean a monkey as in Darwinian sense. It's a creature, a human being of low intelligence, a creature of low culture, but still a human being, but an ape-like person, ape-like men in whom the mind principle existed, but it hadn't been activated. So the rational soul had not entered, so to speak, into the physical body in those early times.
The dating of this time isn't it in harsh conflict with Darwinian evolution in terms of the data that.
Totally, totally.
So how do we reconcile them both?
You can reconcile them by really looking at the hard evidence in that 900-page book, Forbidden Archaeology, and its summary, The Hidden History of the Human Nature, which
Hmm.
is full of tables and full of data. It's not hearsay. But
Yeah.
also, I will always say this, Àlex, as a real scientist, you have to look at the counter evidence. People who say this is wrong, why this is wrong. Not just it's anyone, any fool can say it's wrong. It says
Hmm.
nothing. But if it's wrong, why? Where is your evidence for saying
Hmm.
that?
Hmm.
But if you see a metallic sphere with grooves around it, and several of them, and it's been dated by the carbon or the argon method to 2.3 billion years, if you think that's wrong, well, tell me why. If you see footprints dated to 500 million years in undisturbed geological strata and you think it's wrong, tell me why.
If true, what would that change? What would be the biggest
The biggest,
implications?
yes, the biggest change that we would realize our divine status. We would realize that we are not just animals, that we are not just, I'm sorry, Stephen Hawking, we are not just an advanced breed of monkeys.
Hmm.
The monkeys are not an advanced, we are not an advanced breed of monkeys. The monkeys, I would say, in my terms, are a low breed of human beings,
Hmm.
so to speak. I'm not, it's an insult to the monkeys.
So where are we
I,
coming from then?
our entire worldview would change because science is very proud to tell us that about our animal origins. And so now we're saying we're not proud, pride has no place. We are saying with reverence, we're
Hmm.
talking about our divine origins, and not as hearsay, but with evidence and proof.
So this goes more along the lines of as so because we must have come from somewhere,
Yeah,
right? So if it's not by ascent,
mm,
evolutionary ascent,
right.
or
Evolution.
branching, some people
Mm,
prefer not the up down, but
yeah.
more branching the tree of
Mm,
life from
mm,
monkeys,
mm.
then from where we're coming from. This is about the extraterrestrial origin of mankind. I mean, I'm happy talking
Right.
about those things. I mean, they're absolutely fascinating, but I want to make sure what's your
Mm,
guess or even your claim or
mm.
your hypothesis here.
Where we've come from.
Yes.
Well, there is nothing but cycles and evolution in cosmos as well. And life on Earth hasn't just appeared by chance from microorganisms from another planet. It's the ongoing life wave from other schemes of evolution. And that is a huge part of the occult doctrine known as rounds and races. Um, Humanity is not just in the present form that humanity takes. There can be humanity in other forms because humanity is really a mind principle. And we don't have to inhabit the form we are inhabiting now
Hmm.
on Earth.
Yeah.
Also, before we uh, adopted our coats of skin, humanity existed in a much more ethereal form. And we find strong allusions to that in all the world literature.
Yeah. This would be one of the biggest news ever. How did
Well, the news is out, so to
yeah,
speak.
yeah, it's out, but
Yeah,
we have those filters that
we have the filters. But Alex, if how can I put it? If quantum physics has shown this tremendous interdependence, and how many has it pervaded mainstream
oh,
science?
no, no.
So if that hasn't happened yet, look at the
Yes.
problem you have.
Yes. Yes.
As Renee Weber, the wonderful professor of philosophy, she actually said it's not the physicist, but the mystic who really has the the grand universal theory, because the mystic includes himself in the picture.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
that hasn't got out yet, look at the challenge.
Wow. Now, let me draw an implication from that too, which
Mhm.
is then perhaps we should not be so, and this is another very unpopular thing to say, but who
Mhm.
cares?
Yeah, yeah.
We shouldn't be so worried about the end of the world or the end of humanity.
No, I agree. It's only, if it happens, it's only the end of a certain phase meaning form of humanity.
Hmm.
And well, behind me, I've got that wonderful book based on Isaac Newton's prophecies, where he talks about the Armageddon roughly in 40 years from now. It's only the end of a particular phase of humanity. And let's always bear in mind that this has happened before, that the prehistoric continents of Lemuria and Atlantis have been destroyed, and a lot of the humanity on it. But the cream of that humanity has moved on. So that life wave. So we as a species shouldn't be worried about the end of the world. Our individual lives, yes, but not as a species. Yes, I agree with you.
Yes. Well,
Because
what?
I really think there are higher forces, there are higher powers that will ensure that the divine plan will work despite all the stupidities and the foolishness of human beings. And
Well,
that divine plan is the evolution of humanity.
a lot to assimilate here, a lot to meditate on, especially in this last hour we've talked. I
Mm,
mean, I'm usually intrigued and also somewhat enlightened by the things you tell me.
thank
But what
you.
we've discussed today, and there
Mm,
have been different things. It's
mm.
quite mind blowing. Perhaps it's because we're in chapter 9 and 10, the last
Right.
ones of the third volume.
Mm.
Wow.
Let me put something on the table. That Darwinian, again, the occultists don't deny Darwin. They say it's very limited. So they extend the chain at both ends tremendously, and they said there's more to it. So if natural selection and mutation are the two pillars, there has to be a refining principle at work. Now, how can, as Darwin said, man descends from a barbarian? If you descend from a barbarian, you're a worse barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
So if natural selection is at work, it can only produce a better barbarian. It's not going to produce a more refined human being. So if you just take the example of petrol in your car, there is a refining principle of crude petroleum. Heat and pressure. If you think gold doesn't just come out of the earth. There's a tremendous process of heat and pressure. What is the refining principle at work in evolution? It is the movement of consciousness. It is the evolution of
Mm.
consciousness. So when natural selection is just a buzzword, who is the selector? Who is
Mm-hmm.
doing the selecting? Why does natural selection want to natural select?
Yeah, well, the whole game is intelligent design without a designer. It's
Ex
refinement
exactly.
without a refiner.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
it's about. Actually, they
Yeah.
hope that with these two principles,
Yes.
right, mutation and selection, you
Yes.
can get all the wonders of the world. I mean,
Mm.
that's their intellectual bet.
That's their
That
game. That's their
yes,
game. Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. But it is designed without a designer, but not a designer in the, God with a white beard
Yes.
type,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
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 And I
No, it's
mentioned the four, the anthropic principle, the
yes.
blind chance,
Yeah.
multiverse, all the various things that
Yeah,
are
it's a
fallen.
mystery. It's a mystery how, given the second law of thermodynamics,
Mm,
we just get newer and more complex and more
mm.
beautiful and more refined
Yes,
things manifesting.
manifesting from the
Yes.
unmanifest.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
A wonderful, wonderful journey. Yeah.
So what's next? Is that all? No. Where are we now?
Well, the summary and the epilogue on our limitless journey, and I think the summary is an attempt to really put it all in context, paying due regard and deference to science. And in the epilogue, I've touched on towards the end this whole question of death and transcendence.
We'll be discussing that. Yes.
Mm.
And by the way, what you were saying today reminds me of also how science works in the sense that we have Newtons and apples fall the way they
Yeah.
fall. That then Einstein comes along and
Mm.
he what he does is he doesn't break Newton. He just
No,
says Newton is this province of this wider continent.
exactly. And exactly so. So he sees more into the same thing. So
Yes.
as I forget who said, was it Marcel Proust? Might be wrong, that discovery is not seeing new things, but
Mm,
seeing the same thing with newer eyes.
mm.
Thousands of people saw apples falling down from trees. Newton saw deeper,
Yeah.
didn't he?
Yeah. Yes.
But he saw deeper, not because he saw the apple. He'd been contemplating and thinking about it. So he had that Zen experience when he saw the apple.
Yes. And at the same time, Darwinian evolution has its
Mm.
place as a province
It
within a
does.
much larger field which is
Exactly.
everything you've been telling us for all
Yeah.
this.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
there are increasing number of scientists who are questioning Darwinian evolution, of course.
Well, I mean, the list of taboos grows, and some of those are in capital letters, and some of them are in capital and in bold, and some of them are
Yeah.
also in red
And
font.
italicized.
Yes, and italicized. And I felt comfortable dealing with some, but now more are coming. Maybe it's because I'm progressing in this kind of video game. And I must say, I'm starting to hear bells about that
Mm.
from different places. I mean, I've talked to people at the Pari Center and also
Right,
privately,
right.
coming
Mm.
from really different disciplines, from translating the Bible, from archaeology, from physics, from the history of religions. And well,
That's wonderful, Alex. It really shows that when a new impulse is ready, it comes through different minds. So again, this provides evidence that the occult sciences is not just someone's big idea. And one of the most famous sayings in the theosophical literature, science is our best ally.
mhm,
So science is corroborating slowly what the eternal wisdom is putting forward.
yes,
So that,
or at least entertaining seriously, and then we can go and start to
yeah,
corroborate. Yes,
or
yeah,
questioning the
or
dogma,
questioning too.
questioning the
Yeah,
dogma. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. Wonderful.
Well, we'll be back, right?
We'll be back, Alex. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know how to thank you for taking me on this journey. I
Well,
couldn't have done
I feel you've been taking me on it.
it.
So
Well, it's a co-journey.
yes,
Thank you,
thank
Alex.
you for
Yeah.
having written this the way you've done it, for sharing this wisdom, these insights, and for being so pedagogic also about it, humble, clear, and comprehensive, and doing all the best with diagrams, symbolism, and patience, and some humor, I must admit.
Oh, that's very
Yeah,
important. Yes.
yes. All
Yeah.
right. We'll continue unfolding consciousness.
We will indeed, Alex. Yes, we'll be in touch very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eddie.